Hello and welcome to Credit Versio's Q&A Wednesday live for May 4th. I'm your host, David Michalek, and every week at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, we come together live on Facebook and YouTube to talk about credit. And as a consumer credit expert with nearly a decade of experience, I've conducted over 10,000 one-on-one credit coaching sessions, and I'm looking forward to helping you understand and improve your credit. So joining us today again is America's #1 credit expert. He has over 30 years of experience in the credit industry, including years working for both FICO and Equifax. In fact, he's one of the very few credit experts that actually comes from inside the credit industry. Let's welcome John Ulzheimer. John, welcome.
Hey, David. Thank you very much for having me. Happy Wednesday, everybody.
If people are asking themselves, man, are we just seeing a lot of John lately? And the answer is yes, you are seeing a lot of John lately.
Yes, you are seeing a lot of me. I stuck it to David and my good friends at Credit Versio when I had to spend 10 days in Los Angeles and enjoying myself for a trial. So I got behind, I think.
Yeah, well, that I think, and you and I both had the seminar that we went to here in Las Vegas, so we got a little behind on our videos, but I think we're all caught up now, and we got Louis back. Lou, I recognize you. I think. Welcome, good to see you. And today, just for everybody watching, this when we all get together, we talk about credit. When John is with us, this is a credit education Facebook Live, YouTube Live. And what we're going to talk about today is how to better your credit. Not so much focusing on the credit repair side. Those are subjects that we talk about when I'm by myself or have another related guest. But today is going to be all about credit, how to improve it. And we typically start off with some subjects that we've agreed upon ahead of time. But if you have questions during the process, feel free to ask. And John, you did a video not too long ago. Thought it was very good. You were talking about credit hacks. And if you're going to talk about credit hacks, I think we got to talk about the fake stuff and the stuff that actually works. So maybe we'll break that down a little bit and talk about, what are credit hacks? Is there anything that's legitimate? And let's start out by doing some dismantling of some of the stuff that's out there that is just not really effective, even though it continues to live on year after year in the credit repair blogosphere.
Yeah, I'm fully cognizant of where I am right now and on whose behalf I'm appearing. And people always ask me, what is your opinion about credit repair? Normally, I try to be very Switzerland. All I'm here is to talk about it, and I'll let adults make their decisions about what they think about everything, whether that's credit repair or fee-based tax prep, or paying people to do things that otherwise you could do for yourself, like mowing your lawn, whatever. And it's weird, David, as you know, there are some people in the credit repair industry that think I am basically the enemy of credit repair, and have told me as much. And there are people on the other side who are like, no. We know that you're very favorable about credit repair, and respectfully, I don't think either of them are right. So I don't see myself as being the enemy of credit repair. And if I was the enemy of credit repair, why in the world have I been speaking at credit repair events this is the 18th year now, where I've been invited and paid handsomely to come speak at credit repair events? If I was the enemy of credit repair, why in the world do these people keep paying me to come and speak at their events? So I don't think that's right. I'm certainly not the enemy of credit repair. The other folks who are like, John's, the advocate of credit repair. I'm not. I don't endorse any credit repair company. I've never endorsed a credit repair company. I just talk about them and then let people make their decisions. I kind of see myself more in the middle. And the reason I try not to get kind of pigeonholed onto one side or the other is because, like you bring up, is that there are a variety of kind of strategies and tactics and methods that certain credit repair companies employ that could reasonably be called unethical and probably illegal. And at the very least, misleading, and at worst, fraudulent. And then there are other organizations that are straight up and are like, look, this may or may not work. This is our fee. Here are all the CROA disclosures. You can cancel at any time. We don't guarantee results. And that's the way it's supposed to be. That's what CROA is there for, to ensure that credit repair companies follow certain rules. And so I that's where this whole issue of kind of these black hat tactics, and these aren't my words, these are what people refer to them online, the black hat tactics and the white hat tactics. I don't even know what that means. But so I think that there are ways to kind of hack the system that really nobody could call unethical, and I'm not even sure calling them hacks is a proper, because hack kind of insinuates something negative. Or but so one of them, well, I think there's two of them. Number one is this kind of unknown built-in grace period for the reporting of late payments. I can't tell you how many times I've been asked, and maybe we should do an article about this or a video about how late can I go before my bank is going to report me late to the credit bureaus. And really, the entire reporting system is voluntary. So your lender can choose to not report you late ever to the credit bureaus. Your lenders can choose to not report anything about you to any credit bureau ever. It's almost like you don't exist in their systems. But the credit reporting standards, they're the Metro 2 standards. The credit reporting standards make it very, very clear that you cannot report someone as being delinquent to the credit reporting agencies until they're a full 30 days delinquent. There is no systemic way to report somebody 1 to 29 days late. It doesn't exist. So when you report someone to the credit bureaus, current, and we all think of the word current as being, oh, I'm on time with my payments, right? I'm paid as agreed. Current in credit reporting actually means anything less than 30 days past due. So current means paid as agreed, 5 days past due, 20 days past due, 25 days past due. Those are all defined as being current in the credit report, in the Metro 2 credit reporting language. And so I think that's one thing that I would suggest that consumers are probably not aware of, is that if they have to make a decision what to pay and what not to pay and what to go a little bit behind on and what not to go behind on, then at the very least, keep in mind that from a late payment reporting angle, you have this 30-day grace period built into the system, simply because the credit bureaus don't want 1 to 29-day delinquencies reported. So if anyone ever suggests, oh, well, I've seen a 10-day delinquency. No, you haven't. You haven't seen a 10-day delinquency on a credit report, because you can't. There's no systemic way of, maybe you wrote it with a Sharpie, you wrote it on a paper, but you didn't actually see anything on a credit report that was less than 30 days delinquent, because there's no way to report it. So that's one thing to keep in mind. It's not really a hack. It's just kind of like one of those, I bet you didn't know types of things. Right. The other one kind of is a hack, and it takes advantage of the nature of the credit reporting architecture. The method by which companies furnish information to the credit bureaus every month is done electronically, and the frequency that they do it is generally once every statement cycle. And once every statement cycle means once a month. And it's unusual and uncommon for any furnisher to report more frequently than once a month, although it does occur, but that's really the drastic exception to the rule, and certainly not the rule. There are some furnishers that report twice a month, right? But most of them report once a month. But nonetheless, it doesn't matter if you report once a month or twice a month. What they all have in common is that it's not real time. So in other words, the purchases or payments you made on your credit card today are not on your credit report right now, because your statement cycle hasn't closed. So there's two relevant dates on credit card accounts that we have to talk about here. One is the due date of your payment. We all know what that is. That's the date that is usually 21 days after your statement has been cut or generated by your credit card issuer. As long as you make your payment by that date, then you are quote unquote current. But it's very likely that your balance is going to show zero, even if you do pay it in full, because during that 21-day period, you're probably using your card again and you're running up a balance. And so your balance never really make your payment in full by the due date. However, if you're going to pay your balance in full by the end of the due date, then maybe you don't need that 21-day grace period. And especially for scenarios where you're going to go out and either refinance your mortgage or try to buy a car or something where you need the highest score possible, it's actually a pretty good idea to hack the system and take advantage of the furnisher's once per month cycle of reporting, and pay your credit cards in full before the statement is even sent to you. And so what you have to do is you have to refocus from the due date to the statement closing date, which means that you're basically foregoing that 21-day grace period, and you're paying your card issuer in full a day or two before they actually cut your statement. And then if you do that, your balance is going to be zero or pretty darn close to zero. And there may be a straggling transaction that has yet to clear that goes through, but your balance is going to be pretty darn close to zero. And then that information is what's going to be furnished to the credit reporting agencies, which means your balance for that particular month is going to be drastically lower than it normally would be. And your score is probably going to go up because your utilization ratios are going to be lower. And you may even have a scenario whereby you are eliminating accounts with balances because the balance really was zero. You really were able to successfully get it to zero. So you may be able to spike your score temporarily in an ethical manner. You're not doing anything illegal. You're just paying your bill at a different time of the month. And you're causing that to show up on a credit report as either zero or much lower. And your score probably is going to go up because of your utilization spike. Now, look, I'm not saying you have to do this every month. I don't do it every month. Because I don't really need my score every month. But when I'm about to apply for something big, like I applied for a car loan last August, and you bet that I did that the month before, paid all my credit cards off by the statement closing date. Yep. And the guy was looking at my credit report at the F&I guy, and he was like, "Wow, you don't have any debt." And I'm thinking in my mind, I actually do have debt. You just can't see it because I figured out how to eliminate it from showing up on my credit report for 30 days while you're shopping my credit reports out and trying to get me financed. So that's what I would call a pretty good hack, temporarily anyways.
Well, I'll give you a real-time example right now. So I don't know if I told you this, John. I'm in escrow right now after the crazy wild ride it is trying to buy something here in Las Vegas. I mean, every time we're about to look at a place, they already had a cash offer. By the time we looked at a place and about ready to give an offer, they already had an offer. So finally, we got into a nice place. But working with the mortgage broker, I asked him, okay, when are we going to do the pre-qual? And I was certain to make sure that I paid everything off before the end of the statement date. So same thing, same experience with you getting financing for your auto. It's the same thing that when he pulled my credit for the mortgage, I had everything paid off. I think maybe 3 days prior to him pulling it, it was when everything reported over. Everything came across zero balance, and he calls me up. He's like, "Hey, wow." He goes, "So all your mortgage scores are above an 800. So yeah, we're not going to have any problems here." But I mean, that's like you said, it's not something I tend to pay them all off most of the time. I'm not at the moment because I'm holding on to all of my cash. But so I'll probably next month, have a balance on the credit cards. But it's definitely a difference that you can see. I don't know what the jump went up to, but it was enough to get me over the 800s. All right, so Aaron's got a question. Then we'll move on to the next subject. Well, we're still on the same subject, John, but we'll expand on it. So I had a drop in my Equifax and Experience score this month, and the only change was the oldest account turning 6 years old. The consensus on my FICO was a scorecard reassignment. Can you please talk about this? And then he's got a second part of it. I had the same drop in my TransUnion score a few months ago when my authorized user account only present on TransUnion hit the 6-year mark. I'm curious, John, what Arian is referring to a score drop. Are we talking about normal score migration, or is it something more serious?
Yeah, I mean, you're asking me to diagnose an illness by looking at almost no information. So I mean, I can't start guessing and chasing around what may or may not have caused the score to be different. Normal. So you bring up a term that doesn't get used very often, score migration. So let's kind of take a step back. So first off, your score is not like a thermometer where it is constantly going up and down and then stays at some temperature for some period of time because you're inside a house and it's climate controlled, and then goes up and down as it gets. That's not what a credit score does. Your credit score is not a permanent component of a credit report. It's not just sitting there going up and down as information on your credit report changes. That's not what happens. Your score is calculated at some point in time based on a snapshot of information on a credit report, and then it disappears and goes away and is recalculated or calculated again at some time in the future based on whatever the then current snapshot of your credit report looks like. So whenever, and I realize I'm being kind of clever with my wording, and this is probably a little bit of semantics, but your score doesn't really change like that. So you can't say, oh, my score went up 10 points. No, your score is different 10 points. That's what's really happening. It's not like it traveled from 600 to 610, like you go from point A to point B in a car. It was 600, it went away. The stuff on your credit report changed, and when it was recalculated, it was 610, and so it changed 10 points. If you were to calculate your credit score every single month at the same time on the same credit report with the same scoring model, you would be able to track over time. And there are some apps that'll do this for you, and they're actually pretty good. Discover's is fantastic. Yeah. American Express is fantastic because it's the same FICO score from the same credit reporting agency at around the same time every single month, and they will graph it and chart it for you, and so you can see very clearly what your score has done over time. And so this organic movement in your score over time is commonly referred to as score migration. And there is healthy score migration, and then there is unhealthy score migration. So your score should not be the same every single month, and it will likely not be the same every single month. It should be close every single month unless something drastic changes on your credit report, like, I don't know, you just maxed out a couple of your credit cards and you've never done that before, or you were able to get the one charge off on your credit report deleted. Yes, you should expect to see a drastic difference in your score. But normally your score is gonna migrate between plus or minus 25 points month over month. That's natural and expected and healthy score migration. If it starts spiking one way or the other, kind of like what an EKG looks like over time, as you're like a heart monitor, then the changes to your credit reports are more significant, and that's why your scores are migrating. So that's FICO. So FICO are usually plus or minus 25. Vantage score tends to be, at least from my experience, Vantage score, or my experience and observations, Vantage score tends to be a little bit more sensitive to changes in your credit report, and you should expect to see more pronounced spikes and drops in your Vantage score, even for things like increases in credit card debt. And what that means, there's an explanation for that. What that means is that particular scoring model is more sensitive to changes in credit card debt, and therefore your scores are going to reflect that to the positive and to the negative. So, if you try to figure out why your score changed 5 points one month and then changed 7 points the next month and then went back up 8 points the month after, you're going to drive yourself crazy because every single thing on your credit report changed from the prior month. Everything got a month older. So inquiries got a month older. So the classing and deduping is now different. All of your trade is now a month older. Your balances are now a month. Everything is a month older. So something new may have been added. Something old may have been removed. So I wouldn't get all hung up about just these very minor and frankly immaterial changes in your score. Where I would focus on is, are all those scores telling the same story about you? Okay, meaning that if you have a 750 and then a 740 and then a 738 and then a 747 and then a 752, you may look at that and think, good Lord, why the hell can't this score just kind of pick a number and then stay there? over time. Well, every single score that I just said tells the same story about you. And that story is that you are a really good credit risk, even though those scores aren't the same. It's the same thing if you're a 581 month, and then a 582, and then a 567, and then a 591. They're all telling the same story about you, which is that you're a bad credit risk. So what's really more important is the story the same, not necessarily are the digits the same. Every score and every change in score, there is an explanation why that score changed. And the way you would have to go about determining why your score went up 8 points or why your score went down 4 points is you would actually have to do a full-blown, it's called an impact analysis. You would actually have to do a full-blown manual scoring of the credit report before and then the credit report after in order to determine what characteristic or variable changed so that the scoring assignments were modestly different over the 2 periods of time. That process takes several hours. And if you have a really long credit report, it can take a couple of days because it's like math. If you do one part of it wrong, then everything is going to be wrong. All of your results are going to be wrong. I do that a lot in my expert work when experts try to say, oh, the score went down 100 points because of this late payment. And I'm like, all right, well, let's see. And so I go in there and I rip apart the credit report with the scoring model. And, you either validate what they said or you're able to refute it scientifically. So there's a way to do it. It's just, no one's gonna do it for you to try to explain to you why your score is 8 points different, because that's really not a different score. It's a different 3-digit number, but directionally speaking, the scores are telling the same story.
Yeah, I remember at one of the seminars you did, John, years ago, we spent, gosh, I don't know, this was just like a cursory overview. This wasn't even a deep dive doing the hand scoring, but we did that in one of your classes, and I remember thinking, wow, this is extremely complex. But you're right, you'd never want to do that for 8 points, 10 points, 15 points. But Arian, just to finish up on this subject, to give you put a little bit more meat on the bone, so to speak. So I was telling you a second ago, right when I went through the qualification, scores came back. I think on my Experian it was 802, something like that. And then I haven't paid off my credit card, and I'm putting stuff on that because I'm trying to hold on to all my cash for the down and everything.
Sure.
And then when it updated again, my that same score went from an 802 to like a 780 or something like that. So there's a 22-point drop. 100% probably has to do with my credit card balance not being at zero anymore. So no concern. That is just natural score migration, as John explained. Probably having to do mostly with the fact that my credit card balance increased significantly from the prior month. So nothing to worry
about. Remember, there's also don't discount the influence of the fact that those scoring models that are being used for your mortgage are ancient.
They are ancient,
and they're ancient, and I think they're 4 generations off the most current at one bureau. Or no, they're 4 generations off the most current at 2 of the credit bureaus, and I think 5 generations off the most current at another one of the credit bureaus. So, look, if you want a truck that performs like a 1999 truck, then go buy a 1999 truck, but don't compare it to a truck that was built in 2021. They're not the same thing, right? They both take you from point A to point B, but that is the extent of the similarities. They are drastically different. They ride different. They have different technologies. One uses more gas than the other. They're not the same thing. So you have to also chalk up some of this issue of kind of odd scoring, outcomes to the fact that the models that are, and look, I've said this repeatedly, and I have to say it again because you never know when someone's going to watch one of these videos and get their feelings hurt. This is not a criticism of FICO. This is not a criticism of any of the credit reporting agencies. This is not their problem. This is FHFA's problem. They caused this. So, to the extent that, inquiries are treated different in one of those 3 models than are treated in every single one of the other FICO scoring systems. Low-level late payments are treated differently. Medical collections are treated differently. Paid-off collections are treated differently. Low balance delinquencies are treated differently. Everything is treated differently. And so if you were to compare your 3 scores, say FICO 9 across or FICO 10 across all 3 bureaus versus the scores that your mortgage lender got, which sounds like they're all really good anyways, so it's not really that big of a deal. But let's just say you were a 620, a 624, and a 618. Those are more meaningful score levels as far as kind of crisscrossing risk tiers than really high 700s and low 800s are. So for you, it kind of sounds like it's a non-issue. But for other consumers whose scores are, in the meaty part of the curve, low 600s is about 100 points below the national average. Those are not good scores. But they can still get mortgage loans, but they're paying a whole lot more for them.
Yeah, no doubt. Kristen Howe says we're building credit and do this every month with our cards. We make it report 6% utilization every month. It has helped so much. That's good, Kristen. Nothing wrong with paying them off. Yeah, nothing wrong with paying them off all the way.
Yeah. The only if it's working for you, then keep doing it, right? But the only scoring system that is rewarding you for maintaining low utilization over time, like consistently over time, is VantageScore 4 and FICO 10T, neither of which is used for anything.
Yeah.
So the fact that your utilization has remained around 6% kind of chronologically, that's called time series data. That data is maintained on a credit report so you can see it, but there's only 2 scoring systems that consider it: FICO 10T, VantageScore 4. So every other model that's used, FICO 9, FICO 8, all the Vantage scores prior to 4, the mortgage scores that David was just talking about, they don't care what your utilization was last month or the month before or the month before. They only care what your utilization is the day that they calculate the score. 6% is fantastic. In fact, if you, several years ago, FICO published a study called, what were they called? The FICO High Achievers or the FICO High Flyers, some really pithy way to describe consumers who have really good scores. And it was for consumers who have average FICO scores, either 760 and above or 780 and above, really good scores. And the average utilization for those consumers who have those really high scores was 7%.
Yep.
So to the extent that you're nailing something just below 7%, that is really helping you to get those fantastic scores. And as the market moves to adopt these newer scoring models that do consider trended data or the time series data, meaning that 24-month history of balances relative to limits, then yes, keeping 6% over time or something low over time, you're gonna reap the benefits of that. But you're paying interest every month. So I just want to point out that your score is costing you money because you're paying interest to your credit card issuers. And so to the extent that you can pay them off every month and not have to worry, you'd rather be at 0% month after month than 6%, because then not only are you you're earning those great scores, but you're also not paying interest, which is probably in the neighborhood of 16 to 17% APR. And that's not a cheap date. And you're still going to accomplish the same thing. You'll just be able to bank a little bit more coin every month.
So, John, remember you and I were talking before we got on live, and I said, yeah, I made some comment about the regulars. I'm like, I bet you Mike Smothers is going to be there, and he always has something fun to say. Sure enough, doesn't disappoint. Says, hey, David and John. So, John, you're a big fan of Authorized User. I'm ready for you to add me to your Delta American Express card.
That's funny.
Oh, Mike.
Yeah, no, I am a big fan of Authorized Users. That's how I built credit. I've told this story a million times. My dad added me to his Sears credit card. I think that was the first credit card I ever had on my credit report. So I am a fan of Authorized Users for building and rebuild. I just added my son as an Authorized User on one of my credit cards. And that it's great until I see all the charges. All these free games he plays online that I end up, that he.
Oh, you actually gave him access to the card, like you gave him a card?
So well, I mean, he has a card, but with Apple Pay, you have a card even though you don't have.
Oh, I got you. Right? Oh, I got you. Yeah. I thought maybe you might have added him on to like some old card or something like that,
it's an old card. It's an old card. If people, I don't do card endorsements because I don't. all these card issuers are they're clients of mine. I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings by
Sure.
saying good things
Yeah,
about
no
one
doubt.
card. But I've got a lot of good credit cards, and one of them that I have that I love is this Fidelity retirement benefits card, and instead of earning Sky Miles or cash back, I earn money that goes into retirement accounts.
That's
So
smart.
I love it. It's not a ton of money, but it's better than a stick in the eye.
For sure. Scott Oliver, what is Equifax's deal? They're always 70 points lower. That'll be
They hate you.
what's
They
Scott? They just
can't
don't
stand
like you.
my Equifax score is always 70 points higher. They just don't like you. It's that simple. What is it? Occam's razor. The most
Yeah, the
logical
simplest
explanation
is usually the correct one.
That's it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, they just don't like you, Scott. Sorry, bro. You're on
Yeah.
the 70-point lower list.
Yeah, pick it. I would just get in front and pick it.
Yeah.
Equifax.
No, I know. I don't want to. I know we're picking at Scott, and he's a good sport for letting us have some fun with him. He's a good dude. So look, I think for those of us who are kind of locked in and engaged with this whole credit thing, and we are a very weird group of people that outside of our little group of people, I think people think we're weird. Why do you care so much about your credit reports? Why do you care so much about your scores? All that's terrible. Blah blah. We're very unique individuals that we tend to follow this as closely as we follow it, and because of that, because we're so engaged with these reports and these scores, we tend to pick up on our own personal patterns. And one of the patterns that we tend to pick up on is which of the credit reporting agencies tends to yield the best scores. And by knowing that, obviously, we're going to know which of the credit reporting agencies tends to yield our worst scores. And you can also get a really good idea of kind of the chronology of your FICO scores over time relative to the chronology of your Vantage scores over time. And I can tell you, and I don't know if Scott or if any of the other folks who are watching experience something like this, but my Vantage score credit scores are always about 40 or 50 points lower than my FICO scores based on the same credit report data. Yeah. And they are absolutely more volatile than my FICO scores. If you looked at kind of a comparison of my FICO scores, how they change over time, and then my Vantage scores, how they change over time, it is not similar. I mean, when one goes up, the other goes up, and when one goes down, the other goes down. But it's not kind of a similar difference in scores. They're drastically different. So this is for Scott, and this is for anyone else who's experiencing the same thing that Scott's experiencing, meaning that there's one credit bureau that seems to be constantly, that's really valuable information. And here's why it's valuable information. Because Scott, the next time you go shopping for credit, the first question I would ask your prospective lender is, what credit report are you going to pull primary for me? And if they say Equifax, then I would say, see ya, and I would go to another lender and try to find one that is going to choose TransUnion or Experian, because they're going to see a better score than if you went to a lender that is going to pull Equifax as the primary. And so it's, while I acknowledge and I understand that that's frustrating, that you can't figure out why you can't crack that nut with respect to the score at Equifax, but man, oh man, that's really valuable information when you go shopping for some form of credit.
On my credit report, I have sort of the same thing with you, John, not to the same degree where my Vantage score tends to be a bit lower than my FICO score, but my TransUnion score, much the same way that Scott's score is lower on Equifax, significantly lower. Mine is significantly higher on TransUnion, and there's the one explanation that I see for that is I have an authorized user card from an old friend of mine that's 15 years old, maybe a little bit older, 20 years old. I can't remember exactly. But that one is only on TransUnion. It's not on Equifax and Experian. So my average age of accounts is significantly higher on TransUnion than it is on Experian and Equifax. So, I mean, my guess, obviously, we're not in a position to diagnose whatever it is with Scott, but I would explore the possibility that there's probably either something derogatory on Equifax that's not on the others, or there's something very beneficial that's on the others that's not on Equifax.
That's right. Look, like I said, there it is. While it may seem like a mystery right now, it is something that absolutely can be. It is a mystery that absolutely can be solved, but it is. Unless it's something really obvious, and a lot of times it's something really obvious, but not in this group, right? I mean, the folks who watch us know how to read their credit reports. They know when something is different. I would consider kind of the garden variety layperson who isn't engaged as we are. When they look at their credit reports, they absolutely will miss like the big landmines, and they won't consider. Yeah. Oh well, but that one shouldn't have been on. They'll make it almost like they'll justify it and argue that because it's a justified delinquency that it's not a bad delinquency. Like, oh well, my doctor wasn't supposed to report. It's that none of that stuff matters. The backstory is irrelevant. The fact that it's there is what's relevant. So, but the group that we're in right now, these are the sharper knives in the drawer, and so I don't suspect that it's something really glaring, which means that you really do need to do something a little bit more. Kind of strategic or not a nuclear option, but a more surgical option to try to diagnose the difference. But if you're going to sit there and you're going to compare and you're going to have to go line item by line item, attribute by attribute, it is a enormously time consuming activity, and 70 points is a lot of points, though. So I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of maybes as to what could be causing that type of a difference.
Yeah. All right. Let's see what we got here. Where Anisha calls us information weirdos. It's funny, John, when you were saying, people, well, how come you guys care about this information or spend so much time on this information? And my response is, how can you not? I mean, credit defines so much. Like, if I hadn't paid attention to my credit, if I was put into the same situation where I'm like, hey, my landlord decided they weren't going to renew my lease, which was a little bit of a surprise to me. And if I didn't really have a good eye on what was going on with my credit, I would really be at the mercy of just whatever was going on with my credit at that time. And that makes the difference between 2, 3, 4, 5 percentage points in your interest rate, and some other factors that can sometimes be unfavorable. So, I mean, paying attention to this stuff is really, really critical.
Look, we tell people repeatedly to become more engaged with your credit reports, and I mean, we practice what we preach, right? I remember. I'm going to tell you a story. I remember, and I'm not going to name any names because that's not cool. I remember attending a credit-related event with probably several hundred, and it wasn't one of these credit repair events that we go to, David. It was an event that had most of the big lenders, like the big lenders, and it was several hundred people attending a multi-day event. And I remember one pretty senior level guy from a very well-known, massive lender kind of telling a story about why he thought it was a horrible idea to give consumers access to their credit scores. Because remember, 20 some odd years ago, consumers didn't have access to their credit scores unless they knew somebody who worked for a car dealership or knew someone who worked for a mortgage lender. But otherwise, they didn't have access to their credit scores. And, the trend became giving more information to consumers over time. And I remember this guy, and he wasn't just being a jerk. He was legitimately concerned that, look, my bank lends billions and billions of dollars every single year to consumers, and we depend on these things, these credit reports and scores, to make decisions, and we rely on them being as authentic and reliable as possible. And if you go out and tell people, hey, pay this credit card off, move this balance from here to here, kind of giving them these little roadmaps to higher scores, his argument is you're making my job harder because now you're telling people how to kind of not change your practices in the long term, but what to do today and tomorrow just to get a little bit of a higher score so you can get a loan next week, and then maybe you're going to revert back to however you paid your credit prior. And I get it. I understand his point. And so the fact that we have become so engaged, at one point, at least one really big lender was concerned about that, because I think the fear is that we would. It's called artificial performance, and it's the best analogy I can give you is if you're watching your children in a room playing with each other, they're little angels, but the minute you turn your back or walk out of the room, they're beating the heck out of each other, throwing food up against the wall. So the only reason they're behaving is because you're standing there staring at them, right? It's artificial performance, and they're going to revert back to their normal conduct the minute that you're not watching. So that's what he was concerned about, was artificial performance. And so I like that we are as engaged as we are, and I'd like to think that some of the stuff we do doesn't teach people how to fool the score for a week, but it kind of teaches you how to make subtle changes to your credit management practices so that you can earn these scores and never have to worry about 620s and 580s again.
For sure. Yeah. Big difference between the two, and picking up good habits, understanding how credit reports and scores work. I mean, that's what we're all about. That's what we spend every single Wednesday, for 45 minutes, maybe 55 minutes going over, because, if you are at the mercy of whatever decisions you make, and God forbid they're not good ones, then this is stuff that you can carry around for many, many years. I'm speaking from experience. I remember, the first couple of late payments that I got, I was probably like 19, 20. I think it was a Sears card or something. And I remember thinking, I should probably be worried about this. But just something like inside told me, like, this is not a good thing. And I didn't know why necessarily. I mean, I wasn't defaulting on the debt. I was just paying it late. I'm like, I'll get to it when I get to it. A typical, teenage idiot. But the more that we can explain this to people, because the penalty lasts a long time, and the penalty is very, very expensive.
That's right.
And it limits you from a lot of things. I don't start off the live with this particular line anymore, but John, you know this better than anybody, that a lot of the options that we have in our life are dictated by our credit score. Even employers are looking at our credit scores. To a certain degree, depends on the circumstances, but background checks, security clearances, they're going to want to dive in a little bit and see, do you honor your word or do you not? And
look,
like you said, John, a second ago, they don't care about a backstory.
They don't care about the backstory, right? Here's a perspective that I'd love. And again, I'm not talking about the people who are watching right now. I'm not talking about y'all. I'm talking about just people in general who hate the credit bureaus, who hate credit scoring, who are distrustful of the system, whatever. I'm talking about those people who are kind of maybe a little bit unfair and unreasonable in their anger, but perhaps they have an alternative agenda that drives their anger. Why don't you become a lender and start lending your money? How about that? So since you hate the credit bureaus so much and you're so distrustful of the credit scoring systems, why don't you let me borrow $100 without knowing anything about me? Or why don't you let me borrow $10,000 without knowing anything about me? My guess is that you're not going to. And I know what some of the reactions are going to be. That's an unrealistic example. Consumers can't be borrowers. Not true. There are, peer-to-peer lending club, for example. I don't know if you remember Prosper, where you can actually fund consumers borrowing, and you take the risk of them not paying you back, and you've got to pick whatever collection agency is going to go after non-paying debtors. So you absolutely can put your money where your mouth is. If you hate the system so much, and you think that lending money is something that can and should be done without considering how people manage their obligations, then fine. You're smarter than all these lenders. Go make a gajillion dollars lending people money on Lending Club and Prosper, and then get back to me. And or let someone rent a house without checking their credit.
Yeah.
Good luck. Good luck getting them out when they stop paying you, because the tenant has all the rights in most states, even if they're not paying. So,
Yeah.
the people who hate the credit bureaus, either have lousy credit because they don't know how to manage credit, and they're pissed off because someone caught them, or number two, they don't understand the importance of the information, or number three, they're being paid by someone to be angry, and it's their job, frankly, to be angry. And so their anger is not genuine in my book. It's you're paid to be angry, and so you're doing your job. So you're not authentically angry. You're just kind of acting like you're angry. But look, to the extent you want to go become a lender, there's plenty of ways you can do it, even as a consumer.
Sadly, John, too, I think that to some degree, whatever measure it is, the credit repair industry, I think, stokes some of these emotions in people, because it's kind of a classic, classic motifs where it's like, there's got to be a good against evil. There's got to be, there's got to be some kind of a conspiracy or some kind of force that's working against you. And I saw that a lot when I first came into this industry. It's like, well, the bureaus do this. I don't want to name his name, but there was a guy that held the big seminars that I met you at many years ago.
Yep.
And had an entire book that I won't name, but it was something that he handed out. And inside of there, it was a very damning overview of the bureaus. They don't care. They don't do this. They don't want that. They're trying to suppress. They're holding you down. So you give that to hundreds and hundreds and thousands of people eventually that are in the credit repair industry, and they, not knowing any better, go out and they spread that stuff. I think there's a degree of responsibility on the credit repair industry itself for stoking those flames, and it's completely unjustifiable. And
look, I think I do a lot of work for them. So I do a lot of work for the credit reporting agencies, and I do a lot of work for the big lenders and the big debt collectors. So I can tell you from firsthand knowledge, that's not what there's not some evil person sitting over there in a room trying to figure out how to stick it to consumer. It's just not exist. It's just not true. It's just factually inaccurate. Do they screw up? They do. They absolutely screw up. And you know what? And a lot of times they acknowledge it. Hey, we messed up here, but we didn't mess up here. So it's a little bit of a different, especially in these lawsuits where, kind of a plaintiff will come in and try to pretend like that their entire life has been ruined by something. Yeah. And there may be some justification to it, but in the grand scheme of things, there are other things that were unrelated that may have been influential. And but I think that's the important thing is we're a very forgiving society, right? If someone screws up, like if I don't show up one Wednesday night, I forget about it and I apologize. My guess is that y'all are all going to forgive me. You're not going to forget John Ulzheimer exists, and you're not going to stop logging into David's Wednesday night lives. But if I'm an asshole about it and blame it on you, you're going to hold it against me, right? I think we're very forgiving. So to the extent that people are like, look, we messed up. We acknowledge we messed up. We'll fix it. We'll try to do better next time. I think that generally people are very forgiving of folks who acknowledge their mistakes and try to do better.
Yeah, I remember one of the first conversations I had with Steve Rieger, who well, that's been on this live a couple of times. And for those of you watching, if you're not familiar with Steve Rieger, he worked at TransUnion, actually ran their California division for dispute resolution. And he told me one time, he's like, listen, we really want to get everything right. That's a big part of of what we're trying to do, working with the data furnishers, is we don't want anybody to be hurt or to have incorrect information. We work hard to try to get this stuff resolved. And I think that was probably one of the most honest and heartfelt. And this was years ago. This is when I maintained some of the the foolish beliefs that I got from back in the day, and actually hearing it coming from guys like Steve and you, like you realize that people do make mistakes, bureaus make mistakes, data furnishers sometimes make mistakes, and they want to get it right.
Look, there's no benefit to a credit bureau or a data furnisher to get it wrong. Because getting it wrong makes two people angry. Number one, it makes their customers angry, and it's hard to acquire a good banking customer that's a profitable long time. That's a very valuable asset for a lender.
Yeah.
Number two, if you get someone mad enough, they're going to go find a lawyer and they're going to start suing people. That is very, very expensive. Even if you win the lawsuit, you still didn't win the lawsuit. You still paid a whole lot of money. It's almost like, it's almost like the payroll of the Super Bowl winning team. Hey, congratulations, you won the Super Bowl. Your payroll was $200 million. So you know what I mean? So it was still really, really expensive, although you won, but it was still really expensive to doing so. And so there's really there's no upside to getting things wrong, but there's a whole lot of downside.
Right. All right, John, we're coming up past the 50-minute mark. Everyone that
it goes so fast. Oh my gosh.
I know,
it's like incredible. It goes like that.
It's incredible. So everybody who's joining us today, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it. We'll be back again next Wednesday. John, thank you so much for your insight and your education. Value it.
Yes, sir.
A lot makes a big difference, and we will do it again soon.
All right. Thanks,
okay.
y'all.
Thank you, everybody. Take care.
All right. Have a good